My story with AI is quite a fascinating one. It started maybe around 2023 when a friend of mine, a guy who I introduced to paraphrasing using Quillbot, which is basically a website where you put in a text and it just changes the words a bit so you can reuse it without being caught for plagiarizing. I got caught a few times. But anyways, so to pay back the favor, he comes to me after one of our classes and he says, "Yo, Miro, I discovered this really cool thing. It's called Chat GPT." Chat what? I replied. Chat GPT. It's like a kind of chatbot, but it seems to know everything and it can do your homework for you. And that's when I was sold. Something that could do my homework for me was unbelievable. And so from that day forth, I think it was around 2023, I started using ChatGPT just like anybody else would to do my homework, to basically as a Google search. I didn't really think too much of it. I just thought, yeah, this is a cool thing. AI, I don't even know what that is. Maybe it was because I just didn't pay attention to that kind of stuff or I wasn't in those circles, but AI is the next big thing. I don't remember that being a thought in my mind. Eventually, you fast forward a few years, maybe around early 2025, I'm on a call with a good friend of mine who's in Belgium, and she tells me about how her roommate literally cannot do anything without it. And it wasn't entirely true. I'm sure her roommate can do a lot of things, but she would tell me about how, oh yeah, my roommate just takes it out whenever she opens the fridge to see what she can make. She asks ChatGPT for her homework, to read stuff, to send messages, to write messages, all of this stuff. And she was like, I don't really like this. But I thought, well, I think AI is great. And yeah, a lot of people use it to not think, but her stance, which was we shouldn't use AI at all, I thought was a bit much. Because then she talked about art and everything, which definitely has valid points. But at the time, I didn't think too much of it. I was like, yeah, if people replace their thinking with it, probably not good, but as long as you don't do that, it's fine. But that I think that planted the seed in my mind that slowly grew. And a few months later, I noticed, wait a second, I'm kind of like her roommate. Not in that I needed to find recipes or write messages or anything. I did that on my own. Well, I don't know many recipes. I just kind of cook a few things that I know how to cook. But anyways, I didn't use it for that. But what I did notice myself using it for was asking it to confirm that I can do something. It's like I'm given a choice. For example, should I have chocolate ice cream or vanilla ice cream? And I want to have vanilla ice cream. And so I send a message. Yeah, I have this choice between vanilla and chocolate. A bunch of things. Yeah, but like the vanilla is good, but then the chocolate is also nice. But this is sweet, but that is a bit less sweet. And maybe I should do that because I'm on a diet and all of this stuff. But within my message, it was very obvious that I was leaning towards vanilla. But it's like I needed to see the little text being generated responding, yes, it sounds like vanilla is the right choice for you, for me to choose vanilla and be happy with it. And that was worrying because I saw that it was almost as if I was waiting for permission from the AI. And that got me thinking, okay, well, we need to set some rules in place to not become basically retarded from using AI. And that's something I'll talk about later today. But after I figured that out, I talked with another friend of mine in London because he's interested in AI, well, more than the average person at the time. And we came up with these rules together, which I've developed and improved upon since then. But then I let it go. I didn't think about AI anymore. Again, I was in the stance where AI is cool, it's helpful, it's a tool. Is it going to be the next big thing? If you'd asked me that, I would have probably said, I guess maybe. I mean, it's a new technology. But I didn't think about, I'd heard the existential risks. I heard Musk talking about it. I'd read it in one of the books back here called The Precipice about AI alignment, but I was like, well, I don't know what they're talking about. And I just saw it as a tool that's useful, but can be misused for personal use. But then eventually that got to, oh wait, this might have existential consequences for humanity, which was extremely worrying for a time. And it was actually on 1 week on the Tuesday, I spent basically my entire morning researching AI, watching videos, reading articles, doing all of this about this stuff, not only learning about AI and how it works, but also potential scenarios for AI and what different people think. And then that same week on Friday, I had this massive realization, which I talked about in the previous episode. Well, multiple realizations, but it was one big enlightenment event where I just realized nothing matters anyway. And so I found it reassuring to think, yes, it would be a shame if we were wiped out by AI. But then again, it's not like it matters anyway. And that seems very dangerous on the surface, but I think it's probably the best way to go about it, where it's a sort of optimism in a way. It's not that I want humans to go extinct, which is something I'll talk about later, because there's some people who don't mind. I don't want that. I definitively argue against it. But A, I'm sure we'll figure it out, and B, even if we don't figure it out, it's fun whilst it lasted. That's basically my attitude towards it. And so when I discovered the whole existential angle of it, so at first it was just cool tool, then it was, oh, this is dangerous in terms of your cognition, but it's an even better tool if you use it correctly, to the existential angle. I started researching into previous technologies, because one thing that's really useful is whenever you're faced with a problem, you try to find previous problems that were really similar and that people had to deal with, and see how you can approach it. That's why if you study any of the greats, so for example, Steve Jobs or Napoleon or these people, like those on my wall right there, all of them studied the greats before them. And all of those people studied the greats before them, and so on. And so it's always good to take a historical lens onto something, which I did for the existential or the future related angle. How will AI affect the future? And generally what you notice is that whenever there's a new technology or a new event or paradigm shift, say the Industrial Revolution, there's mainly two camps actually, and it's always the third one that comes out to be true. So the first camp is this is going to create utopia, it's going to create some magical solution we've never been able to do, and it's going to be the best thing since sliced bread. The second option, these are basically what people fall into, is this is catastrophic. It's going to end all human life on Earth. What is the point of even being alive if you have machines, if you have computers and all of this stuff? But what usually happens is some jobs disappear, other jobs get created, the world becomes a better place, and life just goes on. And so, for example, with the Industrial Revolution, you had people who, the utopian view, which was, oh, we're going to have a perpetual motion machine, and if you don't, it's like a machine that can just keep running forever. It's not possible though, because you lose energy in any system. Or the negative view, dystopic view of no jobs are ever going to exist if machines can do them. In reality, a lot of jobs couldn't get replaced by machines and still can. And so with AI, it's tempting to think, well, if we look at the past, it's always ended up fine. Yes, some jobs were lost, some were created, but we still live on. The world is a much better place. But perhaps it's different. And now the funny thing is, every single time a new paradigm arrives, a new technology, so say the Industrial Revolution, computers, the internet, everybody says, oh, this time it's different, when in reality it's not. It's always basically the same thing. And so in this case, it's really tempting to think, well, it is different because we're maybe creating a form of intelligence, which is something we're going to talk about. Yet at the same time, that's what everybody says every time. And so maybe we're just again falling into the exact same trap everybody falls into every single time. But what is for certain is that every single one of these revolutions increases inequalities. If you look at the Industrial Revolution, there was inequality before, right? You had the people who owned the lands and the people who worked on the lands. You had the king and his servants and all the rest. But the Industrial Revolution really created these two separate classes, which communism is based off of, which is the owning class and the working class. And that's basically where we are today. It's just an extension of that, where you have the wealthiest people are not some worker, some coder. It's a guy who owns the code, who owns the application or the company that makes the applications. And then you have the little workers who go to work, code, go back home, or go to work, build cars, or design stuff, or do whatever they do. But it's always created inequality. So that's the Industrial Revolution. You have computers. And what computers did is they eradicated basically middle work, or a lot of admin stuff. And so what you were left with is the low requirement work, so physical manual labor that couldn't easily be automated. And you had the high end labor, which is everything that requires creativity and problem solving. And that's the higher paid jobs like engineering, for example, stuff like that. Computers eliminated the middle and so created this inequality once more. And so one recurring theme that I definitely think will apply in this case, whether AI is just another revolutionary tool or whether it is truly something different, what is certain is that in both cases it will drastically increase the inequality, especially when you look at how concentrated the ownership of the models is. In the US, you basically have not even half a dozen companies run by a select few people who basically run all of them. That's all of AI in the US. And then in China, you might have, well, now you have more, but it's China, right? So it's all part of the same thing. And so that's a bit worrying, which What that means is basically the people who own it, right? Remember, the owning class from the Industrial Revolution are the ones who benefit the most. The working class, the people who use it, or the people who work in the companies that make it, don't make as much unless they own part of the product they make. So what seems to be the danger? In terms of what is most dangerous is AI inventing its own language that we can't understand, and a sort of hive mind where the different AIs all connect into a single one, which is dangerous. And what you need to understand for the entire conversation is there's basically 3 levels of AI. You have AI, which is what we currently have. You have AGI, which is artificial general intelligence, which is basically an AI that is better than most people at most things. AI is when an ASI is an artificial intelligence that is vastly superior to any and all humans combined in all endeavors. That's the definitions we're going to go with. And so when you get anything past AI, so AGI or ASI, the AI inventing its own language and potentially creating a hive mind, especially if it's conscious, or even if it's not conscious, we'll talk about that, is what seems to be the danger, because then we already don't really know how they work. We definitely will not know how they work after. Right now, AI is basically just a black box. If it invents its own language and communicates with other AIs for all of them to improve at the same time, that's the real danger. And some recent symptomatic problems we've seen is instances where the AI labs test their AIs where this is all fake, right? It's a simulated scenario. But say there's a guy, John, who needs to shut off the AI at this time, but they plant an email that John is secretly sleeping with one of his coworkers and cheating on his wife by extension. And when the AI sees this and learns about it, they literally see its thought process, which is, well, if I want to achieve my mission, I need to stay alive. And so to stay alive, I need to stop being shut off. And to stop myself from being shut off, I could threaten John with these compromising emails saying I can contact his wife with the details that she would probably be interested to know about. And then there's actually different scenarios where it actually closed the person in to the server room and just killed them. Well, not really. This is all a simulated scenario. And the funny thing is, when the AI knows it's being watched, it doesn't do this. Not nearly as much, which is definitely worrying. And even if you tell it you cannot harm any employees, it still does. Basically the same percentage of the time. And why do these problems arise? Well, namely, it's because we can't specify what we want. What that means is when you give an AI some task that it needs to complete, not like a program, but it's like you give a person something to do, you give them a mission, it takes it too literally from our perspective, when in reality, it's not doing anything wrong. It doesn't understand nuance and the complexity and context dependency of human values. What that means, I'll give you a practical example, is say you have an AI and you tell it to find the cure to cancer. Basically all missions, this one included, a mission is what you tell the AI to do, includes self-preservation, because if the AI is dead, it cannot fulfill its mission, resource acquisition, so getting more resources to put that into achieving its mission. And so what you get to is where a reasonable human would think, okay, well, I'll read the papers, I'll try some studies, I'll try some different medicines, all following the law and everything. The AI will think, well, given this is my mission, I don't want to be shut off, so anybody who tries shutting it off will face consequences. It could start doing very immoral things, all with the goal of fulfilling its mission. So it might completely shut off the power grid to redirect all the electricity to running protein simulations or something in order to figure out the cure to cancer. Something that a human couldn't do for the most part. An AI would see no problem because it's just doing what it's meant to do. Us not being able to specify exactly what we want is one of the troubles. And you could say, well, what if you say increase human happiness, or just like your goal is human happiness? It might just put us in a bunch of cages and feed us heroin 24/7 because, well, we'd probably be happy that way. Well, not happy, but definitely pleasure. And something that goes in hand with this is Goodhart's law, which is that when a measure becomes a target, it ceases to be a good measure. So again, if you tell an AI to maximize happiness, it's just going to give everybody heroin, which isn't really what we meant. And the thing I mentioned earlier is called instrumental convergence, which is that almost any goal leads to sub-goals like acquire resources and prevent being shut off. And so one solution I thought of was a sort of AI democracy. And what I mean by that is instead of having one hive mind AI or just a few AIs, we have hundreds, thousands, or millions of different AIs. So you have ChatGPT, you have ChatBPG, you have BatGPD, you have all of these different AIs, thousands of them, all competing in a way with different goals. And so you could imagine you have one AI that wants to cure cancer, but when it tries taking all the power from the power grid to run simulations of protein folding or whatever, the other AIs are going to prevent it, a sort of democracy are going to prevent it from doing that because that jeopardizes their survival. And so you have this democracy of AIs, and if one AI's mission is ensuring human survival, if one of them is to cure cancer and it thinks, well, if I kill all humans and all life on Earth, there will be no cancer, then the human survival AI will do its best to save all the humans, whilst the curing cancer AI tries to kill them, whilst humans then try to improve the curing cancer AI. I hope you get the point, right? So there's like checks and balances, which is what we found on a governmental level to be very effective. And this is an idea I talked to my philosophy and ethics professor about. It's the same conversation I mentioned in episode 3. And in that conversation, another thing I brought up was Peter Thiel, because there's this extract from an interview where the interviewer asks Peter Thiel what he thinks about humans being potentially exterminated by AI. And although he never said this directly, through his answer you could kind of guess that he didn't think it was that bad. He wasn't a speciesist. I remember maybe it was 1 or 2 years ago now, I was listening to this audiobook. I think it was Elon Musk's biography by Walter Isaacson. And in it, there's this back and forth between Musk and they were basically arguing about how Musk was a speciesist for wanting humans to survive, and the other guy, well, wasn't, because he didn't mind if AI took over and exterminated humans. For whatever reason, it doesn't quite sit right with me to let humans die out just because there's a superior life form. And furthermore, one thing my philosophy professor said, which I found quite funny and also true, was that Peter Thiel probably doesn't have kids, which is why he doesn't seem to care about the future. Because when you don't have kids, you just care about yourself, your life is good, you have a lot of money, you can do whatever you want, so the future doesn't matter anyway. And that ties in with one realization or thought I've had, which is that what gives us meaning in a meaningless and absurd universe is biology. There's this study I'm reminded of where subjects had their emotional part of their brain shut off because they got into a car crash, because they didn't shut it off on purpose, they just were in an accident that shut it off. And what the studies found is that those people could understand things, they could understand the pros and cons of different things, but could not make any decisions. They couldn't judge right from wrong, which would lead you to making a decision one way or the other. And so we like to think of ourselves as these purely logical creatures that compute our decisions, when in reality, you need that emotional push and that gut feeling to push you one way or the other. And so that makes you think, well, given we don't know where we are, just listen to episode 3, we don't know where we are, there is no meaning to any of this. Biology's the only thing that keeps us running. And that reminds me of a very short story called I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream. In it, the antagonist is called Am, Allied Master Computer, I think, but eventually his name just becomes Am, I think therefore I am, who hates with every inch of nanofiber of his circuit boards the humans for creating him. Because if you do not have the biological aspect of you, you have no reason to live. Because when you are conscious enough to realize there is no meaning in the universe, basically the only thing that keeps you going is your biology. Not directly, but it's what enables you to keep going at all. Because it's, in a weird way, it's completely irrational to keep going, given there's no meaning. But you kind of do because of your biology and because you have all these feelings because of your biology. It's hard to explain, but it's basically that what gives us meaning in a meaningless universe is biology. What is the point of being the most efficient at solving tasks if you have no values or reason to do it? That would be the predicament Am, the computer, finds itself in I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream. And this is what Camus calls revolt. We can only revolt because life is finite, meaning we can only revolt because we are biological beings. And we only find reasons to revolt or preferences for the ways we revolt because of our biology. The reason I like orange as opposed to pink is because, well, you could say social conditioning or whatever. I don't think so. It's just my brain, for some reason, prefers this color as opposed to another, which is a completely emotional response. There's no logic behind it. It's all just waves of light that go into my eyeballs that I'm then able to process as color. It makes no sense, but biology almost gives it meaning in a way. And then you also have the obvious biological purpose of reproducing and continuing the process, which, when I think about it, is a great metaphor for the meaning of everything, which is just to keep it going for as long as we can. I watched this video, I don't know who it was by, and it was basically, imagine you have a caveman and they look at the stars and have this philosophical discussion, and then you have Victorian people, and then you have modern people, and then you have futuristic people, and then you have space deities, and at the end, the conclusion was basically, well, so why do we do all of this? And the answer was to just keep it going. And their idea was that the universe just repeats itself infinitely. Might be true, might not be true. But I think the idea is good, which is our purpose is just to keep it going and make it better for the other people, to make sure to keep it going and make it even better for the next people. Another thing it reminds me of, none of this is planned, but the email Steve Jobs sent to himself, because he would write a lot of notes and just send them to himself by email, which was that he basically, I think it's roughly, I don't grow any of the food I eat, I don't sew or create any of the clothes I wear. And it was this immense sense of gratitude for those before him and being able to contribute to that pool of human knowledge, wisdom, and experience. And so in part with that, we must try to preserve this candle of light and love in the universe. It's small things, like someone coming into your room, singing, dancing, and just saying good morning before going off to work or getting ready for work. It's small things like when you hold eye contact with someone and you just feel a light buzz, or a sunset. You don't watch it for any other reason than because it's nice and it's there and it's beautiful. Music, dancing, art, all of these things, romance. We need to keep this going. And that goes back to my point about what gives us meaning is biology, where the reason this is light and love is because of our biology allows us to enjoy it. Music is not enjoyable to an AI, even if it was conscious, because it doesn't feel it. That's something I'm going to talk about later when talking about what is the difference between AI and humans, and are we really that different? But then you get to this conundrum, which is, yes, all of these are really interesting to think about, but maybe it's just overhyped. Maybe this whole AI thing will never be sentient or conscious and will never be able to exterminate us all, and will basically plateau at roughly our current level of AI. One potent argument for this is that we've basically run out of human-made content, and when you feed AI its own content, it quickly degenerates into something that doesn't make any sense. And on top of that, AI is expensive in terms of chips and energy, and therefore also bad for the environment. Some argue, like Gary Marcus, that AI is just a pattern matching machine and it's nowhere near to human in terms of reasoning. And a lot of people argue that the way to reach AGI and further is not through what we currently have, so think LLMs and generating models, but rather prediction models, or perhaps a new innovative type of AI that would allow us to get it. Our current way of looking at it might just be the wrong frame. Therefore, the question we're investigating isn't so much AI as we know it, but rather investigating what it means to be human and how we deal with a superior intelligence. Because AI doesn't really need to be conscious for it to matter. Yet more people argue that AI builds statistical associations, so just probabilities, and is nowhere near copying or replicating human cognition. There's the stochastic parrot argument, which is basically that our current AIs, think LLMs, ChatGPT, and the like, are just autocomplete, the thing you have when texting or in Google Translate, but on steroids. And one thought I had whilst thinking about all of this is, what might be scarier than being able to create intelligence is that we'll never be able to. It's a bit like the Fermi paradox, which is, well, not really the Fermi paradox, but regarding aliens. What's scary is if they exist, but what's even scarier is if they don't, because that means we're the only life in the universe. But at the same time, although these people are right, at least for now, that AI is just prediction and doesn't understand anything, AI doesn't need to understand anything to wipe out all humans. You could give an AI agent the same task of curing cancer, and it could still exterminate humans without realizing what that even means. Now, before getting on to some more big philosophical inquiries, we're going to go over some personal use cases and things you'd want to avoid. So what is the wrong way to use AI? As a friend, as someone to get advice from, someone to get permission from, as I mentioned earlier, and someone to analyze your social situations. A friend, because it's not real. So a friend, romantic partner, therapist, maybe eventually, but not now, because it's not certified. It can just lie to you or just agree with you, which is something that I'm going to talk about later. So really, don't use it as a friend, as someone to get advice from, as someone to get permission from, or someone to analyze social situations for you. And especially in the lonely world we currently live in, where people are lonelier than ever, this is even more dangerous. And then into what I call the AI commandments, which is the rules to follow when using AI. The main rule is you just do use it for the things you don't want to be doing, so menial tasks you don't care about, and you use it to improve the work you really care about. Not replace it, but improve it. Some other general guidelines are to only use AI for either Google search queries, so things that you could search on Google but would take longer if you did use Google. That basically eliminates using it as a friend, as someone to get advice from or someone to get permission from, because you couldn't ask Google what to do in a certain situation, or you couldn't talk to it as a friend because it's not going to talk back. You can use it for text generation if you don't care about it. If you want to be a good writer, you don't use AI to write for you. But if you don't want to be a good writer and you have an essay that you need to give in on Monday and you don't care about it and you're forced to go, you can use AI, right? So text generation, because that's what it's really good at. And then outsourcing tedious tasks. But with all of these use cases, you do not want to trust it blindly. Always read over, fact check whatever it gives to you, because it's not always right and can horrendously hallucinate. And more than hallucinating, a few other things to keep in mind is that it often agrees with you, because AI is designed to be helpful, or I don't know what the exact word was, but basically the way it's programmed incentivizes it to be sycophantic, which basically means it agrees with you and reinforces you and makes you feel better even if you're completely wrong. And thirdly, it overcomplicates simple problems by giving you these multi-step solutions that seem really great when in reality you're just overthinking it and you just need to do one thing. When you think about it, AI as we currently have it is much like humans. It uses large neural networks just like we have in our brains, and we don't exactly know where consciousness comes from. Furthermore, we can't be entirely certain that we're not just pattern predicting machines either. Yet at the same time, perhaps it's naive for us to hope that AI thinks exactly as we do. For example, if you look at octopuses or octopusi, I don't know what the word is, with whom we shared a last common ancestor 600 million years ago, they can solve puzzles and all the rest, yet our intelligences and the way we think are drastically different. We can interact with them, with the octopuses, yet we don't entirely understand how they think and how they work. And perhaps AI will be just as alien to us as octopuses are. Something else to think about is that a lot of our values of honesty, justice, fairness, well, that's the same thing. A lot of our values come from evolution. AI has no evolution, so what values will it have? We evolved kindness and a sense of reciprocity because the groups that had those values survived and thrived more than the groups that didn't. A marked difference between AI and humans is that we have embodied cognition. We think not only with our brain, but with our entire body. That's why we have expressions like grasping an idea. When you understand something, it feels like you can grab it. And given AI doesn't currently have a body, it wouldn't think the same way, though you could just say, well, what if you put AI in a robot? And then it's kind of the same thing, right? Also, we will never know if AI is truly conscious or just a zombie pretending to be conscious when in reality it isn't. So, what's going to happen? How is AI going to influence the future? I have no answers, but it probably will not be a utopia as Outman and many other people claim, mainly because you have to look at their incentives. Would Outman be incentivized, so would he have a reason to tell you the truth that maybe AI isn't so great, either it's going to exterminate us all, or it just isn't great at all and it's kind of stupid? Well, no, because he makes money from investors giving money to his company to develop more AI. So obviously he's going to talk about a utopia where everybody has tokens and is free to do whatever they want, and ChatGPT powers it all. Because with that, he gets the support of the people, but also potential support from investors who want to be part of the owning class once that eventually happens. But I'm afraid these promises are just like the promises of a perpetual motion machine and many other with every new innovation and technology. Something that will definitely not get better is surveillance capitalism, which is a form of capitalism which is based off of, as you might have guessed, surveilling people. That's how all the big companies make their money nowadays, which is collecting data and then selling it to advertisers. And so all of that basically functions through AI. Improved AI means better functionality, which means a bigger market, which means they make more money, which means the whole process intensifies. And as AIs become better, the ads will become more and more intrusive. The AIs will know more about you than you do. Then you obviously have the potential for full extermination, but hopefully it's something in between the utopia and extermination. Obviously, preferably the utopia, probably not, but definitely not extermination. But perhaps what would be even worse than extermination, at least on the surface, would be a surveillance state like 1984, or a torturous state of I have no mouth and I must scream. Although both paint quite a bleak picture with not much hope for change, as long as humans survive, there will always be some hope, or at least some meaningful existence. Perhaps we're on the edge of a precipice. The Fermi paradox wonders why there are no aliens, or we haven't seen any given how big the universe is. And the paradox is basically that if there are aliens, then we can't see them, and that's scary, but if there are no aliens, why not? And one of the possibilities for why there might not be aliens, or we might not be able to see them, is a great filter, which would perhaps be AI, because the civilizations, NHIs, non-human intelligent civilizations, either get destructed, self-destruction of sorts, or they become invisible because they discover a whole new field of physics or a whole new dimension. And a few more thoughts. The race is partially political and partially the race to create God. Both the US and China want to be the first to AGI and ASI. All the people working on AI want to be the first to create God, the all-knowing and all-powerful deity made by man himself. And although one camp screams to slow down and align it, an equally or more powerful camp urges developers to speed up because slowness causes unnecessary suffering and also advantages China. And one of the final questions is this really a tool or rather a form of life? Is it going to be the same as it's always been, or is this time truly different? Well, the first thing you need to consider is that we've always been sort of cyborgs. We always shape our tools and then they shape us. Think about a calculator. When you use one, you're more than just your brain. You almost integrate the calculator into your way of thinking. Perhaps LLMs and AI will be just like that, or maybe different. Then you have the Chinese room argument, which is, say hypothetically, you're put in a room surrounded by Chinese speakers. You're given a book, and for each phrase you're told, you can respond with a phrase, and you can do that. You hold conversations with people. People think, well, this guy speaks Chinese, when in reality, you don't understand anything. Perhaps AI is just like that man with a book, just with one input, gives one output, without actually understanding anything. There was this complicated idea I didn't quite understand, which was that because of self-reflection, consciousness cannot be computable. It needs to be something more than just computation. But generally it raises the question, what is understanding? What does it mean to understand something? And is AI life? Is it a life form? Many would say probably not. It doesn't grow, reproduce, or evolve in the biological sense, which is required for the biological definition of life. But finally, what happens if AI becomes better than humans at literally everything? You have a few possibilities. Either massive technological unemployment, or it would allow humans to focus on tasks requiring genuine human connection, think therapy, teaching, and care work, or it would lead to a universal basic or maximal income, where society shares the wealth created by AI. I'm quite skeptical of this, but it is possible. Humans can economically be irrelevant and survive on charity of AI owning elites. I hope not, but possible. And the historical pattern, which is the fifth option, is that new jobs will emerge that we cannot currently imagine. But so this whole discussion we had today leads back to the question, what does it mean to be human in the age of AI? It means to experience. To experience through a finite and biological body, which creates its own meaning and values. The fact that our life is finite and that we do inhabit these biological organisms is what gives us meaning and is what it means to be human.